and peacefulness, then this achieved condition is the opener of the door. This is the power that makes possible for us the actual direct participation in reality. It is that power which comes to us when we do not interfere or condition that power, when we keep it and keep its principles in integrity and in right. We are like what the Chinese sages said, that in the ancient days the wise slept without dreams. There was no dreaming about mistakes or therapeutic dreams. There is simply a great quietude, and in this quietude, a perfect peace. The heavens open, and the reality affirms itself in our lives. The story of the fable of Christ knocking at the door is much in this thoughtfulness. That which is real knocks at the door when we listen, but when we do all the talking ourselves, we cannot hear the gentle voice of truth or note the gentle knocking on the door. It is in peace and quietude alone that we can open the doors. It opens the doors means that we make ourselves receptive to a higher level of consciousness. We make ourselves receptive to the experiences of the inner life. We have a victory of soul over circumstance. We have a victory of reality in ourselves over the errors and illusions of daily living. As a result, we are in peace. We are quiet. Now, in the old initiation rites, we were usually subject to very serious tragedies. In the ancient mystery rituals, the candidate was given very firm and terrible tests. There were even degrees in which his life itself might be hazarded, unless he was right. And in all these things, he had to fulfill the great tests of life. He had to recapitulate his own existence and go through a series of harrowing circumstances which would result finally in his attainment of oneness with the inner consciousness. Well, maybe today we're still taking the same rituals. We don't call them rituals anymore. We call them mistakes of other people or inabilities of governors to govern, an inability of the governed to govern himself. All these things we now call blames. Probably they are actually tests, experiences which will never cease until we stop making the mistakes that cause the trouble. There will never be a time when social legislation can prevent the individual from making a mistake. And we can never have perfect leadership until we have an intelligent following. There must be dedicated followers and enlightened leaders. And in every case, the enlightenment means self-victory, the victory of the inner life over the outer circumstances, the outer temptations, the outer beliefs, the outer circumstances which lead to trouble. So the Buddhists and the Zen people, for instance, have a very quiet method of meditation. They sit quietly and they simply allow not a blank to set in. The idea is not to make the mind a blank. The idea is to make the mind a gentle disciple, at the kneeling or seated at the foot of the reality within. The human becomes the chela of the divine, becomes the disciple of that which must always be the leader. And various ways these revelations come to people. Sometimes they may come in an occasional dream, which is a vision, or a real spiritual experience, which is comparatively rare. But all spiritual experiences must be doubted if the individual who has them has not conquered the common mistakes of himself. Anyone who believes an extrasensory experience, who is still incapable of the direct control of his own life constructively, must be afraid of imposture. And any organization that promises the individual that he can become great without becoming good is also a very dubious organization. There can be no rising upward into the higher levels of consciousness except through a kind of meditative discipline. And what is meditation in this case? It is not sitting in a corner somewhere with your eyes closed and your fists clenched tightly. Meditation in this case is the quiet recognition, realization of the values of life as they have been presented to us in daily experience. Meditation helps to bring us a new way of being useful, a new way of solving or helping to solve problems around us. Now, we can say with all meditation practices that nobody can solve anybody else's problems. This is true. Therefore, the fact that we think we are solving them is not quite really true. The part that is beneficial to us is the fact that we have given up something of ourselves because we love someone else more. This is the great gift. And the great gift, in turn, going to them, may give them the courage to see what we have done and do it for themselves. Every individual who becomes happy must make himself happy. There is no possible way of other people making anyone really happy. And any apparent happiness that arises without the control and direction of inner faculties is going to come on the rocks one of these days and be seriously shipwrecked. All these things are part of a large plan, a large purpose, a divine way of things. And in our quietude, in the small voice, the voice of the silence will speak. And the voice will be like the voice of God in Bami's vision. It will be a small, quiet voice, never a thundering of power, never a vast expression of some determination, never a final order descending from on high. But it will be the quiet voice of a gentle person telling us something we ought to know, and telling it as though we were beloved children, and not because we were great people. The recognition of these experiences comes often in various small ways. I know, for instance, one case in which an individual was very fond of a garden. They loved to plant flowers and things of that nature, and they always loved flowers. It was a very kindly relationship. It was a beautiful, quiet relationship, and one day this person, while looking at one of the flowers that was particularly beautiful, had something happen. Suddenly, this flower seemed to speak. It didn't say anything, but it seemed to speak, and suddenly the law of that flower burst into the mind of this very kindly gardener. The law of the flower became a symbol of the whole unfolding of the cosmos. The flower became an infinite symbol of an infinite purpose. And it is. It is a part of a great and infinite purpose. But most of those who look at the flower don't see it that way. But this person saw it that way. Saw the flower as suddenly bursting forth into a perfect symbolism of the universe. It was there all the time, but at that moment, the reality in the individual picked it up and brought it out. The message came from something beyond the mind, something beyond the emotions, but an infinite impression of reality, which meant that the person had for a moment's contact with one of these levels of higher insight. Plotinus, the Neoplatonist, said that in his lifetime, that only on 2 occasions had he been lifted up into the presence of reality, and that for only a few seconds. But that became the most powerful experience of life, and all of life from then on was never the same as it had been before. The same might be said true of Luther Burbank with his love of flowers and plants. Here's a man who was able, very obviously, to influence flowers and plants. I saw him one afternoon and we talked about these things, and he said that he could talk with the plants, and the plants answered him. And when he said he wanted them to do something, they did it. So several big universities sent classes and students and so forth to see how Mr. Burbank was taking the spines off of cactus so they could be used in the desert to feed cattle. And they did exactly what he did and got nowhere. And he explained that the reason they didn't get the result was because they hadn't talked to the flowers and plants. They hadn't told those plants what he wanted them to do, what they should do, and how they could help by doing it. But if you talk with them and understand them, even in silence, you commune with them, not as little things with a root, but as reality, and wound up in a magnificent little mystery, that they obey. And he told me, he said, the only person I ever had that was able to do it was an old Chinese gardener. He said, this gardener watched me and listened. And from that time on, he always talked to the plants. And they did what he wanted them to also. He said, you've got to understand life. Life is not you and nothing, or you and something that doesn't mean anything. And all the flowers and birds and animals and creatures of the universe are real. And to each level of man's thinking, some form of life becomes immediately instructive. And by accepting the instruction, a great new dimension of consciousness is achieved. This is the only way reality can be proven. It can't be proven in laboratories. It can't be proven in anything except all of nature. The very planet and everything that is on it bears absolute and eternal witness to reality. But the reality is not obvious to the person who doesn't know what the term means, or doesn't know what the experience of it means. To us, humanity is a unique thing. Other things are different. We're now beginning to take a little interest in animal life, but at the same time, we haven't found the realities in these things. We haven't found that by looking at the most simple living thing, that we come face to face with a truth, a reality, an inevitable, which we can never influence, but which we can learn to accept and obey. So this is what really opening the door is. This is why the Indian went out and did vigil. He did vigil because he knew that the air was filled with life. He knew that everything that existed was real. Now, he couldn't come back and explain all this to his fellow tribesmen, although most of them probably were sympathetic to it. But the proof of the fact was something else. The proof was that when he went out as a healer and sat and did vigil, the great ones, the true ones, sent symbols to him so that he would know what to do. And far when he was up here with me, he said that a little light appeared somewhere on the earth around him, around a little plant, or a little flower, or a weed, or even some little small animal or creature. And he knew instantly that that which the light was around was the thing that was necessary to heal the sick man for whom he was praying. So he took this material, usually an herb, which he had never used before. He had no botanical knowledge, but he had seen in a meditation that this was it. And he took it and he made a tea with it and he gave it to the sick man. Then the reality proved itself. The man got well. That was the only reality that could be demonstrated. All the others could be, it may be a mistake, but if the man got well by a mystical experience, then that experience was real. And it's the same all the way along. We cannot get the positive demonstrations that we seek of all these things. The only thing we know is that the closer we can come to reality, the closer we come to peace, happiness, and health. And the further we get from reality, the more rapidly our problems multiply. Now, for those of us who are just, kind of going along on the way and haven't got too far, there are things we can do ourselves each day. We can begin to quiet the prominent causes of confusion. There is no meditation based upon some esoteric exercise that can ever work if the individual has not accomplished a transformation within himself. This was the highest phase of alchemy. Alchemy was to make gold out of base metals. And spiritual alchemy was to discover the eternal gold of reality in all things, which can be released and brought into manifestation by art. And art in this case is the beauty. It is the skill. It is the wonder by which we do what is right because it is right. This type of thing is something that has come down to us for a long, long time, and it will continue to come down to us until we obey it. We must find the only answer that there is, and that is the utopian answer, that the human being must live the fullness of humanity, of his own endowment. He must manifest all the manifestations of the condition of the level of life upon which he exists. And having done this, he may then request very quietly, or may not even have to request, because realities perpetuate themselves. We expect to go on to the next level of understanding and insight. We are held behind by the ballast of our own mistakes. And until we are able to master those and to redeem them or restore the integrities in them, we will remain in trouble. So the first thing to do, if you're really anxious to get on to the discipleship principle in nature, is to start in and prove worthiness. Prove as the ancients did in initiation tests. When a disciple wanted to enter into the mysteries of Eleusis in Greece, the first thing that was done was that his community was invited. The diakon, a leader of the community, was invited to tell what they thought of this young person, whether he was a good person, whether he was a good son or a daughter, because women were initiated. But was this person a good, worthy, honorable person? And if the city father said yes, that he had never been in trouble, that he'd always been a good member of the community, that was a good mark for the person. If he had been troublesome, he would never have been admitted any further. Then, if that was true, they then went to his teacher. Where did this young person study, and what did he study? So they found the master, an old sophist of some kind, who had instructed him. And they said, was he a good student? Yes. Was he quick-minded and able to understand? Yes. Well, what did he give him to study? Mathematics, astronomy, and music. That is correct. Then they would probably call the boy to be given the examinations at the temple itself. And if he passed these successfully, he was placed on a 5-year probationship, in which it was assumed that he would take the hope of going on as the basis of a great improvement in himself. He was to go back to his ordinary life and do those things which he believed would be sanctioned, justified, and approved by the temple. He had to be virtuous and clean and healthy all through this 5-year period. He must have no trace of egotism. He must not look down on others who had been rejected. He must simply live a clean, natural, honorable life, serving his family, keeping the rules of the community, and developing his own inner life. At the end of that time, he was put into the tests. And these tests were very severe on many occasions. But they were tests of every courage that the individual had. And every opportunity was given to be corrupted or to be sidetracked. But if he succeeded and lived on and was able to pass the final test, he was brought forth on the porch of the temple and crowned with the laurel wreath and declared to be an official and recognized member of the religious group. This then became something that was so important that in the presence of an initiate of the mysteries, even the king of the country could not remain seated. The divine instruction took precedence over all material honors. And the initiation was more important than to win a great military victory or to attain to be an archon of the state or to become a leader in any external affair. He might win the Olympic Games 10 times, but it was not nearly as much of an honor as to have the wreath of the initiate placed upon him. From that time, he was bound by oaths greater than himself that he would never corrupt, never compromise, never in any way abuse, and never falsely reveal to the unworthy the instruction he had received, and would never use that instruction for personal physical gain. Now, those were pretty rough instructions, but at the same time, they are the type of thing that we must all ultimately face. Fortunately, we don't face it all at once. We don't have to do all that is right at one time. But little by little, day by day, we are supposed to discipline our mistakes, gradually gaining control over them, correcting attitudes that are not conducive to common good, and in this way, by a certain regular order of things, come finally to the point where the interior takes complete control of the exterior, and the individual lives from the root of his own reality, that he is now no longer a person. He is now a great soul in a body. He is an illuminate. He has achieved the end that the physical world can bestow. And he has now available to him all the knowledge of his race, all the wisdom of nature around him, and all the love of the deity whom he represents and who brought him forth. So these are the things that open the gates of integrities. And these are the only ways that the gates of wisdom can truly be opened. And I've got a little announcement I want to make this morning. We have with us a friend who had a birthday last Monday, but we didn't speak Sunday, so this is the first chance we've had. And that is our good friend, Gilbert Olson. Well, many of you know. And Gilbert Olson has been a personal friend of mine for 45 years and has served us here ever since the society was built practically. And today we kind of give him a little note of welcome and appreciation on a little belated birthday party for him. It's not going to be a real party, but it's going to be a chance for those of you who know him to congratulate him on having made it, and also to point out that a big change has come in Gilbert's life. He has left Downey, where he lived for very many years, and he's now moving to Glendale in order that he can be over here more often. So we want you to all say hello for him.